Earlier, Linda, you talked about challenges, especially with the climate of today. So as a board member and a person that works in a nonprofit organization, what challenges did you face while or being active in the field?
Well, one of them is that, as I learned more, and I got involved, there were a few other colleagues who were involved with child abuse, who worked where I worked early on, and that was helpful. But then it was then Family and Children's was mainly a counseling agency back then, from '88 up until late '90s. And not everybody had the understanding. Yes, they had training and degrees, but they didn't all work with children, for starters, and they didn't all work closely with parents, and certainly didn't work with abuse or domestic violence. And that's where my energy went to after a couple of years. So it was a question of explaining why it was so important and what to look for, and training other colleagues. That was part of the challenge. And this was true. It was before we had laws that you had to take something to get your credentialing that taught you about child abuse. You had to know the law. None of that existed back then. And even the heads of the agencies, they had priorities and all kinds of things going on. So I remember early on, even wanting to have a staff training and bring it to staff was not always the easiest thing. And even afterwards, not everybody, you try your best. Not everybody would use the information you put out there, so that not everybody would ask when a kid came in with a problem, well, who have they been around, or has anybody touched you in a way that you feel uncomfortable? That wasn't being asked regularly in even the early 80s, so that was a challenge.
Okay. Does anybody else have a challenge that they faced while they were working at the organization that they may want to share?
I'm with Linda, convincing people that child abuse was really a problem. I went out and spoke to groups of people on a regular basis, and you could see in their faces that they were shocked. They had never heard anything like that. And I think by the end of my career, there had been enough attention to child abuse in the media and through ECHO and other organizations that I think the general public did realize that child abuse was a thing, and it was something that needed to be addressed. So
there are hotlines now. None of that existed 30 years ago. And people resisted. Was that you don't talk about things that go on, and kids didn't know they could go and call this number. I mean, none of that.
That one thing that what goes on in the house stays in the house. Yes.
Right.
Yeah, I think, raising public awareness of the issue was a tremendous challenge. And as so many others have already alluded to, there just wasn't a heightened awareness or much concern on the part of the general public until it hit home, and then it was too late. As tragic as the Ann Grotlet case is, I mean, it slammed the Louisville community with the awareness of this issue.
Wasn't Mitch McConnell, wasn't he involved some kind of way with ECHO at one point in time?
No.
But he,
Okay. No, I think he was some pictures or something like that.
He was the county judge.
Yeah, he was county judge.
He was the county judge at the time. We had, at that time, this was before the merger. So this really makes you fully understand how long ago this was.
Okay.
But there was, a mayor and a county judge, and Mitch McConnell was the county judge.
Okay.
Yeah, I think the statutes, taking it to the laws and stuff, that began to change in the 90s, don't you think?
Okay. Yeah.
And the attorneys general, I'm thinking back, the
Dave
people,
Armstrong.
Dave Armstrong, and people like that, Commonwealth attorneys and those kind of people were, because they saw it and they took it into the legal place. I mean, and now I was just thinking about the recent law for sextortion. That and maybe you might want to talk to that, because it's now on the books. So
Lucy, I echo what you were saying about being in a lot of meetings, but I think that, again, one thing that also hasn't changed is that we're still a small organization that makes big impact. And I value that. And so I do try to make sure that we are still in spaces where our voices can be heard about the work that we do. And so fortunately enough, through Kentucky Youth Advocates, there is a whole policy leg that I am a part of. And this was a new experience for me around policy. And again, kind of going back to what you said, Rosie, like, how do we educate the everyday people? So this was not my work. This is not what I went to school for. So I'm going there to learn and to listen, but also to make sure to advocate. And so, we have been doing the work around sextortion, which again is extorting kids through digital spaces. We've been doing that in the classroom probably for about 7 years. And so again, we are a reactive type of nation. And so a lot of times things don't really come to the forefront until something has happened. And unfortunately, there was a incident of sextortion with a kid. And a representative connected with the family and decided to build a bill around having harsher penalties for perpetrators and predators that are trying to gain access to our children. And I remember when we were talking about this, and I'm looking at the bill, and the one funny thing that really resonated with me, they were like, oh, well, when it comes to the kids, what we're going to do is that we're going to put posters up in the schools. And I said, that's great. I said, but have you ever been in a school? There's many posters. And I also said, what about the kids that may not be able to read just yet as well? I think that we have to do our due diligence in making sure that we are in front of the kids, that we are talking to the kids and not just putting up posters, around and, kids being able just to gloss, by it. That's not really giving us an opportunity to create those safe spaces for kids that if something has already happened, that they can identify who the safe adult is and have that conversation. We have to go one step further. And so fortunately enough, we were at, the Capitol. We got to meet with the representative, that placed the bill, and it passed as into law by our governor. And so currently I am working with a couple of community partners where we are putting some videos together for parents and caregivers. And I always still raise my hand, what about the kids? Because my priority is first the kids. And so we're going to be talking about some of those. So you should start seeing some information coming around this new once bill that is now a law, where individuals, perpetrators are gaining access to our children through digital spaces, that there will be harsher penalties for those individuals. So that's a big win for us, because we've been talking about, what I always go back to that group and I said, this is what we're hearing in the classroom. We need to revisit our laws and make sure that our laws are current with what is happening in today's world, in today's society. And so that happened to be one of those. So that is a big team win for ECHO. Okay.
That was Senator Raque Adams.
Yeah,
right?
Senator Julie Raque Adams. And she is a big supporter of ECHO, even previously to me coming on board. We did recognize Miss Adams through one of our events. And I know the tape is still rolling, so I'm going to keep talking. One of our signature events is our Pancakes and Pinwheels Awards. And my background is in special events, and I looked at this and I said, I've been part of a lot of these, these meetings and these breakfasts. And as we want to talk about ECHO, I really wanted to create a space where we could recognize other individuals that were doing the work in combating child abuse. And I remember having not the very first conversation, but the first conversation about this. And I went to Rosie and I went to Lucy and I said, I have this idea and I want to name an award after you all. And I know Rosie was like, are you sure you want to do this? And Lucy did the same thing. And I said, yes. I said, I think, just behind the brand that you created of ECHO, we need to make sure there's a way that we can always reflect upon the work that you all did prior to me coming on board. And so we do have a Norris Leadership Award that we award someone, an individual that is doing the amount of work that you all did previously, the advocacy for kids, still making sure that, our main focus is the prevention of child abuse. And so I was very honored when you all allowed me to be able to create that award. And it is still in existence today. And I hope that that award will always be a part of ECHO going forward, even far after I leave ECHO. And the other award, again, this is why I'm sitting in awe. I'm not talking a lot. I'm really learning and listening again. But Linda brought me in as the president, as the current board president. And we've had a lot of like one-to-one moments. And I don't want to tear up, but she has been one of the biggest supporters for me coming on board. I've worked with kids, but I never worked into this severity of the issues and the challenges and the problems. And I just know Linda as a therapist, when there was hard days, I would call Linda and say, Linda, this is what's going on. And she'll talk me through, and then she'd say, get out of the office, get on out of the office and, go have some time to yourself, which she still does that to this day. And we had an award for volunteers. And I kept thinking, and it just came to me one day, it was on our 40-year anniversary. And I went to my staff and I said, Linda has dedicated a lot of time to this organization. And anybody that sits on the board, we know that typically you should have board terms. But then there's some individuals that you just can't let go of. You just can't let them go. So you got to create that space for them to continue to stay engaged with you. And so that volunteer award, I said, I really want to be able to honor the work that she's done for ECHO as well. And so now we actually have an Engel Heart Award for a dedicated volunteer that just goes above and beyond the work of, of what you would think a volunteer would do. And so for that breakfast, because Linda knows everybody and she's in all these pockets. And I remember trying to surprise her. And I was like, how am I getting ready to do this? And I called her husband. I said, this is what my idea is. I said, but you cannot tell her. And so he's like, I think this is a wonderful honor for her. And then I started talking to her kids and I said, this is what I need, but I need this to stay a secret. And I remember the day, the Pancakes Awards breakfast, Linda, she's calling me and she's like, oh, my kids are coming in town and I think they're here for this event and this, I think it was like Mother's Day, something around that time. I think they're here for Mother's Day to surprise me. I was like, yeah, I think they are. I think that's exactly why they're here. Even when they came to the breakfast, she still had no idea. When I got up to the podium and I was talking about this wonderful individual, she still had no idea that I was talking about her. And then when we announced that we were changing the name of that award, again, I couldn't, think of anyone else that deserved that honor, about the commitment, not just to ECHO, but the commitment to this work that you've done in this community. When I go in the community and I mention Linda Engel, they're like, oh yeah, Yes, I've worked with Linda. And so again, not only Echo are we continuing the work, but we are still honoring these three ladies, by their name and making sure that when people come through the doors, they know that we started on great foundation and footwork because of the three of you all. So that is a way for us to continue your name and your legacy of what you've done previously.
Thanks.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
We're all honored.
Yeah.